Today we look at Oregon football's first spring game in the Dan Lanning era and the biggest takeaways, most of which were on the offensive side of the ball. Let's go.
Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12 Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster. Thanks for making this your first listen or your first view if you're watching here on YouTube every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Conference of Champions every single day. And we are looking at the Fighting Ducks of mighty Oregon today and the first spring game in the Dan Lanning era, which started ironically in a sense, but also unironically in another, with an explosive offensive play. Now, if you talk to Oregon fans about the 2021 football season, they will say a couple of things, generally speaking, right? I'm talking like on the aggregate here. Let's say number one, boy, it was a bad finish to the year, and we couldn't beat Utah. That's very, very true. The second thing that they will tell you is that the offense struggled to push the ball down the field with any sort of consistency. The number of passes that were completed to wide receivers in the 15 to 40-yard range, it was a very small number. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm telling you, I watched every single one of those games. They weren't very numerous. And a good chunk of that was Anthony Brown at quarterback, and I think the other component was Mario Cristobal as the head coach, because the offensive coordinator that Oregon had at the time, who's now the head coach at Akron, I believe, Joe Moorhead, if you watch the tape of his offenses going back to Penn State, yes, they're very RPO heavy, right? So a lot of stuff happens around the line of scrimmage. But when Trace McSorley was their quarterback, they also took plenty of downfield shots. So I don't think philosophically that's the way that he wanted to play. It's how the offense played out. I think both because Mario Cristobal wanted to run the ball a lot as a former offensive lineman, and the offensive line was unquestionably the biggest strength of Oregon's team in 2021 and figures to be again in 2022. So Cristobal wanted to rely on that, but also wanted to run the ball, and Anthony Brown was just a more conservative quarterback. There were plays, if you watch the All-22 film or even some highlights on YouTube, you can see Brown didn't take downfield shots until the end of the year, and Oregon fans were frustrated at that, rightfully so, because he just wouldn't pull the trigger sometimes. There was a play in particular, I think it was against Cal, where it was 4th and 6, and there was a second-level crosser about, 15 yards down the field. I believe it was Chris Hudson. He popped open. He was there in the middle of the zone. All Anthony Brown had to do was let it rip, and it's probably a completion. And instead, he pump fakes, checks it down to Travis Dye, who gets tackled short of the line to gain. That was an all too, unfortunately, recurring thing that kept happening. Sorry, that was just terrible, terrible English from me right there. But it happened way too often. The ball was thrown right at or around the line of scrimmage in 2021. And so when Oregon football comes out in the spring game, and on the very first play, it was a mildly busted coverage as well. But on the very first play, a 70-yard pass completion from Bo Nix to Seven McGee, who's transferring from, or is moving, I should say, positions from running back to wide receiver. That made Oregon fans go, oh my gosh, could this be way different than last year? And I think a lot of Duck fans are rightfully hoping that it will be, because it was something that held the offense back. They ran the ball very well. They were pretty efficient in the red zone. They still had, some pretty good numbers offensively, but it was not what they could have been. The underutilization of the wide receivers was prominent throughout the year. Guys like Johnny Johnson III and Jalen Redd and Devin Williams and Micah Pittman, who transferred because he was hardly getting the ball, and most receivers weren't getting the ball. There were a lot of games where Travis Dye was the leading receiver and the leading rusher for Oregon because Anthony Brown liked to throw to the running backs a lot, and he didn't want to pull the trigger going down the field. So for Oregon football to come out in that spring game and on the first play complete a big pass was almost like a sigh of relief collectively for Duck fans because it's been severely lacking from the offense over the last several years, particularly in 2021. And it just makes your life tougher when you can't, pick up 30 or 40 yards here to get yourself into the red zone or score a long touchdown or, anything like that that makes life easier and gives you some short drives that result in points. Yes, when you have the long drives that Mario Cristobal clearly liked, where you run for 3 to 6 yards and you just keep chugging away, converting on third and fourth and short with a good offensive line, which Oregon was very good at a season ago, and Joe Moorhead was a part of that. He was a very smart offensive coordinator. Yes, it wears the defense down, but I think it wears your offense down too, right? It's emotionally draining to have to go 10 and 12 and 14 plays every single time you want to go almost the length of the field for a touchdown drive. So it was nice to see that beginning, but then it continued, right? No matter who was at quarterback, Ty Thompson threw a nice ball to Chris Hudson down the field. Jay Butterfield threw a long touchdown to Josh Delgado on a back shoulder throw. Kind of a crowded area, questionable decision, but it ended up working out. Bo Nix had another long touchdown, 2 long touchdowns actually to Dante Thornton, both of which were great throws. And Dante Thornton, I think, had 116 yards and 2 touchdowns on 3 catches, which is, look, I'm not making a direct comparison here. Those are Deshaun Jackson numbers. I think Thornton can run short to medium range routes, but he's clearly most prolific. And what we've seen from him on the field on Saturdays in the fall has shown this as well. He's best running the deep route, right? Going up the sideline. And he's 6'4", 6'5". He's got a good frame. He's put on some weight, which he needed to in the offseason. He was pretty thin when he got to Oregon. And he's got great hands, and he's got long strides and really good speed. I think he's going to be Oregon's primary deep threat this year, and that's something that the Ducks have been severely lacking over the last couple of seasons. And so from Oregon's perspective, I think that was a really good sign, and it has the potential to allow their offense to be more explosive than it was in 2021, whereas last year, I think they were focused heavily on efficiency and execution, and even the execution sometimes was lacking when they would cross the 50. But to create those easy touchdown drives, those big plays that help out the offense and get the crowd pumped up at home, I think that's something they could bring back in a sense because it's just not been there consistently over the last couple of years. So that was an encouraging thing that Duck fans had. Another note that I think a lot of Duck fans are making too big a deal out of is Kenny Dillingham, the offensive coordinator, has talked about how they're going to present the threat of going under center, and they will do that from time to time. And really, since Chip Kelly ran a handful of plays under center with some fly sweep action that he stole from Mike Riley at Oregon State with James and Jaquiz Rogers. You talk about an elite, fly sweep handoff duo. James and Jaquiz Rogers, as good as it has been in the Pac-12 over the last 15 years or so. But aside from that, Oregon just hasn't gone under center. And a number of Duck fans or past coaches and players, you'll hear them say sometime, like Nick Aliotti on the broadcast of the game, I think Oregon needs to present that threat. Not really. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing it, but do I think that it's revolutionary offensively that Oregon's going to do that? No, I don't think it changes their offensive capability very much. There are things you can do under center that are effective that you can't do from the shotgun, and vice versa. Whatever works with your scheme and personnel best is what I would want to see you do. And so is that going to be a change? Yeah, it could, because Oregon quarterbacks will actually take snaps from under center. That'll be a weird thing to see. And it's kind of fun in that sense because we just haven't seen it in so long. But is it as impactful as the potential of having a downfield passing game where we actually throw? I host Locked On Ducks, for those of you who don't know. That's why I accidentally had a Freudian slip of the word "we" in there. But is it going to be as impactful, going under center, that is, as throwing the ball down the field? No, not even close. So those were kind of the biggest offensive takeaways, and I'll get to the quarterbacks later in the show. And coming up, I'll tell you about the 3 players who earned playing time the most from the spring game. 2 on offense, 1 on defense. First, I want to tell you about Built Bar. Most people by now have given up on New Year's resolutions. I know New Year's was like a really long time ago, right? So there's no way you're still eating healthy. But if you wanted to then and you want to now, you should use Built Bars. Replace all your candy bars with a Built Bar. Throw them in your golf bag. Bring them to your workout. Have them as a snack around, whatever. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein, and they've got a bunch of great flavors. Mint brownie is my favorite. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. 3 players who stood out in the Oregon spring game above the rest. There were several, and if you want to hear a full breakdown, you can go check out Locked On Ducks, and I'll give the full rundown and go all in. But here we're hitting the headliners, and there were a couple, right? 2 on offense and one on defense. One I've kind of already mentioned, Dante Thornton. He was showing some Deshaun Jackson-like skills with the way he was catching the long passes and beating guys over the top. I think he can be Oregon's most consistent deep threat because he just kind of has that potential, and he's shown an ability. He showed it in the Alamo Bowl when he caught a long touchdown. He had another one, I think it was against Stony Brook last year. He's just got that sort of look as a guy who lines up on the outside. You're not going to put him in the slot, I don't think, hardly ever. At least I wouldn't. And so I think he very much could become a wide receiver one sort of guy, at least on the outside, who you can throw a deep ball to in a one-on-one situation. And Bo Nix, not shy to pull the trigger the way Anthony Brown was. So that could become an asset. Another guy who made that initial opening play that started this whole discussion about big explosive plays and generating headlines of such for Oregon fans after the spring game was Seven McGee. Now, he came to Oregon from the state of New York as a running back. And one thing that was a cool thing for Duck fans to hear is he's from New York, but he said he grew up idolizing DeAnthony Thomas, one of the most explosive, probably the most explosive player Oregon football's ever had. His highlight reels are unlike anybody else. And Seven McGee, when he had that 70-yarder, he caught it in space, and then he did this little weave at the end where he was juking a guy back and forth and trying to turn a DB around, a la DeAnthony Thomas back in the day, which was a cool thing for Oregon fans to see. But the thing that impressed me even more than that, because I knew coming into this season, he almost transferred, by the way, if you didn't know, he was in the portal, and then Dan Lanning came in and convinced him to stay, and he went in the portal after Mario Cristobal left, who had recruited him to the Ducks. But he's making the transition to wide receiver and looks to be doing a really good job of just that. Yes, I enjoyed seeing him carry the ball in space and showcase the speed and the juke ability, but I knew he had that even when he came to Oregon as a running back. But what impressed me the most was his touchdown catch. He lined up in the slot, and it was an RPO play, and Bo Nix threaded the needle to fit it into him, but he beat Jamal Hill one-on-one on a slant route towards the inside of the end zone. And Jamal Hill is someone who has played regularly for the Ducks over the last couple of years. So that to me says that he is making the adjustment to being a full-time pass catcher really well, which is a good thing for Oregon fans because he is explosive. And he showed the hands. He reached out with one hand, bobbled it in the air, and was able to corral it going to the ground. But route running is an underrated part of being a wide receiver, and I hope he can learn this from UCLA wide receiver Chase Cota, or the transfer that is, who's now with the Ducks and looked good in the spring game also. But Seven McGee, I think he's still got a little bit of room to grow in that sense. But when I saw him beat Jamal Hill one-on-one, and he did so a couple times over the course of the game, that to me said that, it's a good positional move and he's going to be able to make the change because it's going to be a tough thing to do. Finding a new position or playing a new position rather is challenging, right? And guys often have the physical abilities to do that, which Seven clearly does. Seven, who wears number 7, by the way, as of this year. Another welcome change in 2022, because if your name is Seven, you have to be, I mean, what would George Costanza say? Huh? If Seven McGee wasn't wearing number 7 as he was wearing number 0 last year? Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I think Seven McGee showed a lot, and getting him the ball in space, that's going to be a really good play at any point in the game for Duck fans and offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham. So the third player who stood out the most was on the defensive side of the ball. And the highlights of the day were primarily dominated by the offense. So the defense created a couple of turnovers. Ty Thompson made a poor throw that Keith Brown picked off. Jaleel Florence, the 4-star freshman corner who committed to the Ducks over USC, made a great play on a throw from Jay Butterfield where he was kind of beaten, but then he got back into it, basically ripped the ball away from Isaiah Crocker. That was really impressive. So there were some defensive moments. J.J. Greenfield had an interception. There were a number of sacks out there as well. one of the guys who was creating those sacks, DJ Johnson. Now, for those of you who are not Duck fans, which I presume is most of you, that's what I'm here for. He has played, I think, 4 different positions. He keeps switching back and forth. This is his 5th year with the Ducks. He's wearing his 5th different number. He was 12 last year. He's been 89. He's been 7. This year, he's number 2. I don't remember what his first number was, but he was playing that edge position, right? Sort of the Kayvon Thibodeau role. He's not a Kayvon Thibodeau type of player, though Dan Lanning has been very praiseworthy of him. And last year he was playing tight end, played a little bit of defensive end, but mostly was playing tight end. And Oregon now has a lot of depth at the tight end position, so it's allowed DJ Johnson to move back to kind of that edge role where you're a hybrid defensive end and linebacker. He can stand up. He can also put his hand in the ground. But he was by far, I think, Jackson LaDuke a close second. I thought DJ Johnson by far was the best Oregon defensive player all game long. He was wreaking havoc in the run game. He was wreaking havoc in the pass game, getting after the quarterback. I think he had 4 sacks in the game, a couple other quarterback pressures. And now you have to take those sacks in context because, to get a sack in a spring game, you just have to get to the quarterback and be able to tap him or make it look like you were going to make the tackle. So it might have only ended up being 2 sacks. Regardless, he was beating his guys regularly, and he looked faster than I've ever seen him. I mean, he was a good tight end, right? He was a good blocker and mostly caught balls that were, at or around the line of scrimmage. And he showcased some good speed, but he had this tenacious energy and drive about him when he was flying in off the end to make a tackle on a running play or speed rushing off the edge or anything that he was doing. He looked like a different player. And if Oregon can get that sort of DJ Johnson this fall, it's going to be a big help to their defense because Kayvon Thibodeau departing leaves a big void in the pass rushing department because outside of Kayvon Thibodeau, there wasn't a great Oregon pass rusher on the defensive line. And so they're looking to fill that void. Braden Swinson is a name who needs to step up this year for Dan Lanning's defense, but Coach Lanning has been very praiseworthy of DJ Johnson. And I tell you what, this spring game showed why. He looked much improved and comfortable on the defensive side of the ball compared to previous years when he's been kind of moving around. And I think that's understandable. You give a guy a full run through of spring practice in terms of reps on one side rather than having him go back and forth. I think that's advantageous. And Tosh Lupo and Dan Lanning have a guy in DJ Johnson who could really, really pop this year if he plays the way he did on Saturday in Autzen. I'll give you insight on the quarterback battle because we learned a number of things between the 3 scholarship quarterbacks Oregon has right now. But first, I want to tell you about Rock Auto. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. The ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible. It's virtually impossible for your local chain auto parts store to have everything you need. Why choose to spend 30, 50, or 100% more for the same parts? Just for an example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store, $216 from Rock Auto. You can save time and money. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. So looking ahead for Oregon football, there are a couple storylines that come out of the spring game. And a number of them have to do with the quarterback position because there hasn't been an official starter named. There's an assumption, I think, among many, I think I would also say wisely, that Bo Nix is going to be the starting quarterback. But there are a lot of Oregon fans who want to see Ty Thompson become the starter. He's the highest quarterback recruit in Oregon football history. And when Anthony Brown was struggling last year, Oregon fans wanted to see him. I understand that frustration because there were moments where I would have liked to see him, especially in the Alamo Bowl. He should have played in the Alamo Bowl. There's no doubt about that. Over the course of the year, they felt Anthony Brown gave him the best chance to win. They did win 10 games, but people were frustrated with Anthony Brown's play and the aforementioned inability to consistently push the ball down the field. And so Ty Thompson has plenty of buzz within the Oregon football program, as he should. He's big. He's got a big arm. And the potential there is something that's pretty easy to see. Um, the storylines that are non-quarterback related, just real quick, the running backs for the Ducks looked really good. And that's a question mark with no Travis Dye, no CJ Verdell, who were the leading rushers last year. Byron Cardwell didn't play, but he's expected to be fine. He was held out for a precautionary reason. Sean Dollars and Noah Whittington are the two guys who could really burst onto the scene in the backfield. They looked really good. I mean, they both showed an explosive burst as ball carriers and getting to the outside. Noah Whittington, the Western Kentucky transfer, and Sean Dollars, the former highly rated 4-star who missed all last season with an injury. Those are guys who could be impact players this year for the Ducks. So I think the running back room is fine, but the quarterback battle, I think, got some clarity, at least in the eyes of a lot of fans. I'm sure there are still people out there who want to see Ty Thompson because they're looking for the next homegrown quarterback and a guy who's going to be here for several years and all that sort of stuff. And I get that. And I've talked about it extensively on Locked On Ducks, so I won't give my full thoughts here. You can go check it out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. But in this game, Bo Nix was 8 of 15, not great, for 230 yards. That's pretty great. 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. And the interception was very Bo Nix. It was, and I think this was a good snapshot for Oregon fans to understand what they're getting. When you talk to people from Auburn, they will all say basically the same thing about Bo Nix. He's capable of making really good plays. He will also make some boneheaded mistakes. The interception he threw, I don't care that it was a spring game. That pass should never be thrown. You either take a sack or you use your legs to roll out of the pocket and throw it away. There was nobody open anywhere. It was really well covered by the defense. He instead threw it behind the receiver on a deep post corner route, and it shouldn't have been thrown. JJ Greenfield picked it off, ran it back the other way. But aside from that throw, Bo Nix looked quite good. He put the ball where he needed to. He showed the arm strength. He looked very comfortable in the pocket. He was under pressure a couple times, but he's used to that coming from Auburn, where the offensive line was, outmatched sometimes in the SEC, just a reality of it. And that's one of the things that Oregon fans are hoping for this year, is that he's going to have, less stiff competition to go up against, and he's going to have a better situation around him, right? Oregon's offensive line is their strength. It wasn't at Auburn, and he just needs to build that chemistry with the young weapons that Oregon has. And he seems to be on his way to doing that pretty well. He completed, 8 passes to several different receivers, most notably the 2 long touchdowns to Dante Thornton, and then the one that he threaded through the defense to Seven McGee on the opening drive. But I think he separated himself pretty distinctly in terms of the quarterback battle. There are 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. There's Jay Butterfield, there's Ty Thompson, the 5-star. Jay Butterfield, by the way, was a highly rated 4-star recruit. And then there's Bo Nix. And if you watch the Oregon spring game, I don't know how you come away from it thinking anything except Bo Nix is the most game-ready quarterback, which you would expect because he's got 3 years of college football under his belt. This past season cut short because of an injury, but he's clearly fully recovered, and that was the expectation when he had surgery on his foot. So Ty Thompson in this game had a really tough second half. He was pretty good in the first, but he still missed a couple easy throws, and he finished 12 of 27, 168 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. And the interceptions showed what, I think has held coaches back from giving him the starting job. And that's that he's still learning how to read defenses and make those sorts of decisions. And yes, Bo Nix made the one bad decision, but Bo Nix also did other things well, like converting on several deep passes that Ty Thompson did not. And so I think Ty Thompson is still a developing player, at least based on what we saw here in the spring game over the weekend, because the interceptions he threw, they looked like a quarterback that was still trying to reach his full potential and that was not there yet and needs more reps to do so. Now, some people will argue, well, he needs to get reps in the game. I understand that argument. My counterpoint is that if you don't show an overall competency level in practice, it's tough to just figure it out during the game. There are things you're going to have to learn anyway, but if you don't show a total mastery of stuff in practice or in a simulated game environment, there's a good chance that you're not going to have it when you take the field on Saturdays. And I'm not saying Ty Thompson can't continue to grow and develop and become a more well-rounded quarterback, but the throws that he made, one was way behind an open receiver who had about a step and a half of separation, and one was a ball that looked like it was thrown to the linebacker. So he still looks like he's making some freshman mistakes, and that's okay because he's still a young player. And if Oregon can keep him around and develop him, he can become a good quarterback. But right now, Bo Nix is very clearly the most game-ready quarterback, and I think that is where this Oregon staff is going to go. And I think it's where they should go if they want to contend at the highest level in 2022. I appreciate everyone listening. I will see you tomorrow.